Let me see. Oh, I don't want to record, so I'm going to pause.
A colleague who's in the waiting room.
You want to put it in the chat?
If you can put it in the chat, I'll cut and paste it from there and send it to folks in the waiting room.
Can you put it in chat? Can you put it in chat, Alex? I'm not sure what you want me to do.
So no, I don't have the correct link for this. I got here by logging in and then using the.
Oh, did you
ID.
send me did you send me an email?
No, I
So
was just able, but if someone has the correct link, I can share that with a colleague who's in the waiting room right now and they can share it out.
So just to jump in here really quick, as we are bringing, as this meeting is now being recorded and members of the public are able to join, we just would like to welcome you to the February 14th, 2022 meeting of the East Bay Community Energy Community Advisory Committee. We are having a little bit of technical issues. The wrong link was posted, and so we are working right now to get that corrected so that no one is prevented from joining, either who are members of this body or members of the public. So thank you for your patience. We will start this meeting in about 2 minutes, or potentially less than that.
I think that's what Nick is doing. Alex is getting the link and posting the link.
Yeah, he had mentioned to me that he's still having trouble.
So the link on the website is the correct link?
No, that is not working.
Lori, could you call me for a second? I think I understand the issue. I'm going to send you my phone number and an email here.
Okay.
My apologies, everyone. We'll get this sorted out here in a moment.
Lori, if you want to mute, we can take this opportunity to do just some sort of small introductions from members of the CAC to each other. And we haven't called the meeting to order yet, so we can't discuss anything that is on the agenda. But if somebody would like to introduce yourself and say, hey, this is me, and this is what brought me to EBCE, and this is the area that I represent, then that would be a wonderful thing. I would love to hear from some of our new members. I guess I can actually go first on that, which would be sort of appropriate. My name is Anna Olivia Eldred. I was the first chair of the Community Advisory Committee and was honored to be reelected and serve 2 terms. I was part of the group that got to help bring EBCE together, and absolutely love this organization and the potential it has for the huge amount of empowerment that can happen in our communities, pun sort of intended. And I was brought into this as a sort of a bridge between labor and the environment, and sort of continue to serve in that capacity. Jane, can you go next?
Sure. I'm Jane Frank. I've been with, I'm coming up on 4 years in June. And I work at Numi Organic Tea, which is an Oakland-based tea company. Been in Oakland for about 23 years. And I lead our sustainability initiative. So I learned about East Bay Community Energy when I was looking at how to get our office space carbon neutral. And then learned there was an advisory committee and was excited to come on board. And represent some of the natural product brands, which there are many, many, many in the Bay Area, who are all really focused on sustainability issues, transportation, logistics, all sorts of things. So it's been a real pleasure to be on board and work with EBCE and learn more about the initiatives and how they can support our industry and consumers and brands, and also, our partners out there in the warehouses and trucking and logistics and things like that. So that's me.
Thank you very much. And as soon as our clerk is back, we will start the meeting officially. Actually, Mary, can you do the next one? And maybe we'll just do these three, and then we'll try and get 3 in each meeting so we can all learn who each other are a little bit, which would be great.
Sure. My name's Mary Sutter, and this is coming up on the 4th year as well in June. It'll be 4 years, and I was brought on, or actually was interested in this new thing that was the CCA at the time, 4 years ago. I represent a smallish kind of group in the Hayward Hills, so I'm in the unincorporated part of Alameda County. And my background is in energy efficiency. I was also a public utility commissioner for the city of Alameda for their small municipal utility for several years. That's it.
That's awesome. We do not yet appear to actually have our clerk back yet. So seeing if anybody, Cynthia, you are another old school member. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Cynthia Landry. I'm on the 1021 executive board. And I came on with you, I believe, and Olivia. I think that's must have been about 6 years ago. I was initially part of the steering committee. I have an interest in renewable energy and advocating for PLA agreements and union-friendly agreements, and making sure that we bring in voices from the disadvantaged communities, and the working class voices get heard in this community forum. I also am a member. I'm also a veteran, and I am a person with a disability, and I come with that mindset also. But primarily, I am a labor voice. So that's it about me. And I work for Alameda County Social Services, where I'm a social worker. I work with the homeless folks in terms of barriers to employment. And I'm on our union's climate justice committee also. Thank you.
Awesome. Still do not have a clerk. William, will you go?
Hi, good evening, everyone. William Mutzenberg. I am the vice chair of the CAC. I represent Tracy, California, which is one of the newer communities in EBCE, and I've been representing Tracy since 2021. I wanted to join EBCE to learn more about the CCA, or Community Choice Aggregator model, as well as provide some input on how our policies will impact Tracy. So I'm glad to be on.
Thank you. And can folks volunteer and introduce themselves? That would be really great from our new folks, whoever would like to step up.
I know how to do that. Hi guys, I'm Mickey Souza. I am from the Hayward area, East Bay. I've been in energy efficiency for about 10 years now. Very familiar with the rebate programs from PG&E. I also have installed solar and like to represent the whole East Bay for for the Bay Ren and the other rebates that are available. Currently working on electrification. Very into the buildings and how to bring efficiency to them, mainly in residential, but I'm also trained on multifamily and commercial buildings. So I bring some practical knowledge to the board. And also really believes that inefficiency first and then renewables. Also working with some of the disadvantaged communities. I have been working with a block power some and just doing some assessments for them. And that's about it. Been around since 2021.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We will try and let me just check in here. Lori, do we have the members of the public entered in yet? Is the link fixed so folks can join?
Well, I mean, everybody's joined and I think needs to join. That we've got 7 attendees and 14 panelists.
Yeah, okay, it's fixed and the public does have a way to attend.
Yes, we have now updated our website with the right link. So if a member of the public were to go to the EBC website right now, they would have access to the right link.
And
we are sending out an email to our listserv noting the right link. So
okay.
That at this point, that is what we can do.
Okay. Then with that, we will call this meeting to order. Apologies that it is a half hour late. And can we please have roll call?
Member Letts? Jim?
Was that me?
Yes.
Yeah, here, Jim Lutz.
Lutz. Member Hernandez? Member Mutzenberg?
Here.
Member Lashman? See. Member Swanathan? Member Tara, is it Talreja?
Please do correct pronunciations when your name is called as well.
Yes, that would help me to understand how your name is pronounced. Member Sutter?
Present.
Member Souza? I see her there.
Sorry, Promise, I couldn't get it out of mute. Yes, here.
Okay. Member Hugh? HU member? I don't see them. Member Duggan,
here.
thank you. Member Liu?
Yes, here.
Member French?
Here, it's Frank. Thank you.
Oh, it's Frank?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Member Riata? How do you spell that? R-A-T-I-A? They're not here.
She's over as an attendee.
Oh, she is almond over there.
Harmon
Okay.
Cower is what it shows up, but she's showing as an attendee. She is an alternate for Tracy. And so Olivia, I don't, she's here. Kate is also an alternate, but we're down, so I'm not quite sure.
Member Pacheco is absent. Member Landry is,
Here,
and Member Aldridge.
Eldred. Eldred
Eldred.
is here. So since we do have our alternates here, are there any district members that they are, like, Member Pacheco is gone, so who is the alternate for that area so that they can be informed that they are voting this evening?
Mickey.
Mickey, great. You're voting tonight, Mickey. And thank you, Mary. So for the other members that are gone, are there other alternates that are present who can know that they are voting members this evening?
We don't have anybody from the south, but there's no alternates on the south. So we have people who are here who are representing different areas. So we're missing all 3 south folks. And
So
we've got 2 more people that are alternates, just not for the south.
So Nick, for that process, does that mean that our alternates can vote since we have both members gone and the available alternate, like the assigned alternate for that region isn't available? Alex, if Nick is unavailable, that might fall to you.
Yeah,
It would seem logical to me that they would be able to step in.
If you have an
Sorry,
alternate,
I'm sorry, Olivia, and Olivia, yes, an alternate, I'm sorry, if you are an alternate that is not from a zone cannot step in for an alternate for that. So if we do not have anyone from the southern region, an alternate from another area cannot step in their stead. That was the question, right?
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Oh.
not, you're an alternate for it's not a general alternate, you're an alternate for a specific member. So the same thing with our board. If a member from Berkeley is not at a meeting, Oakland's alternate cannot step in on their behalf.
And then the members appointed by, who are at-large members, if they do not attend, can alternates step in for them?
Again, they're not alternates for that member. So the alternate spot is connected to a specific seat.
All right. Well, we appreciate you being here very much. You are strongly encouraged to participate in all areas of discussion, whether or not there is a vote. You are still a panelist, and we appreciate your participation and input very much. So we have confirmed quorum, yes?
yes, there's 10. Thank you.
Great. Then we will move now into public comment. And as a reminder, public comment is reserved for members of the public who wish to speak on items not on tonight's agenda. Is there any public comment that was turned in prior to 5 p.m. yesterday evening, or members of the public with their hand raised or who've signed up?
Now, Tom Kelly did turn one in, but I don't see him on here. Is there anybody at this time that would like to speak on items not on the agenda? Please raise your hand. I see none at this time. Thank you.
All right. Did Tom turn in a written comment?
No, it was just his name on the list.
He would like us to review an item that is on tonight's agenda, I'm sure. And if he shows up later, we will hear him, as our meeting got started so late.
I'll let you know if he shows up.
Thanks so
I
much.
can see that too.
I have to do a split screen to be able to keep the agenda up at the same time. So I'm going to make this a really short chair report, given the tardiness that we're at. Just general updates. The net energy metering meeting with the CPUC was delayed. I don't have a date for it. I didn't check today, but I don't have a date for that next meeting. There is a possibility of an alternative proposed decision coming out. So we'll be keeping our eyes out for that. The Alameda County planning, let me just pull this up here so I do it correctly. The Alameda Planning Department hosted a community meeting on locating solar and storage projects in the unincorporated county, primarily East County. On February 8th last week, there is the potential for a follow-up meeting. There is a deadline for the Board of Supervisors to bring forward policies in March of this year. They are asking folks for community input in impacted areas. So Mary, you're part of unincorporated, but if anyone knows anyone, please reach out. It's important to give input on this. In the meeting, 5 areas were discussed. Ultimately, there was a lot of community participation, and input from that meeting mostly favored preserving open spaces and doing these projects on rooftops and parking lots in already built environment, with references to our existing plans in the local development business plan. So just know that that is happening out there. The next meeting of the Finance Committee is this Friday. On that agenda is a discussion of stipends for Community Advisory Committee members, I believe, and board members. So if you are interested in attending that meeting, it is this Friday. The next meeting of the Board of Directors is this upcoming Wednesday. And beyond the things that we're discussing this evening, 2 particular topics I think will be of interest. One is an update on potential expansion to Stockton and San Joaquin County, and the other is around brownfields, and it's very promising. I look forward to learning more about it, and since that's not on tonight's meeting, I just wanted to mention it. And we have a new staff member. Alex, if you would like to introduce Kate, that would be great.
Sure, thank you, Chair Eldred. Yes, we have Katie, who is our public engagement coordinator. She's going to be helping us with our communications and our coordination with local government partners. So that would include the city and county staff with whom we engage on a regular basis, as well as local elected leaders and appointed leaders, such as yourselves. And Kate comes to us from UC Berkeley's, previously she was with UC Berkeley's Center for Law, Energy, Environment at Berkeley Law. And we're really thrilled to have her on board. And I look forward to introducing you all in person in some glorious future time.
Thank you. Our kind of the last update on this here is that our meeting minutes have not been, well, they're not on the agenda still for approval. And so that we are going back many months now, like to October. And that has resulted in a delay in being able to pay committee members their stipends because there has not been an official approval, and therefore we've not been able to do who's been at those meetings. I did expect to see minutes on this meeting, at least from last month, but we will get that rectified. Steph, is that correct? By next meeting?
Yeah, I'll just note that I would expect that for the next meeting, we'll have most of the minutes completed. We've prioritized that to focus on board action meetings first. So even though the last CAC meeting was recently, it may not be sort of next in line just because of that. So we're working through a backlog, basically. It's still with Adrian's absence where we have a separate contractor doing those. So apologies for the long delay, but we should be able to get those done by the next meeting.
We really do appreciate it. I know that for folks who have to take hours off work to attend this meeting, that those stipends are actually really important and can mean the difference between folks being able to participate or not. And also our hearts to Adrian, and thank you for all the work everyone is doing to try and make up in his stead. Are there any public comments on the chair report? Hearing nothing from our clerk, I'm going to assume no.
We do have
We do.
one.
Okay,
Yes, and I'm going to, it's Alita Dupree.
Alita Dupree, great. Alita,
Thank you.
if you can keep it to 2 minutes, Alita, we'd appreciate it. We have a lot of time to make up.
Yes, thank you. I don't know if now's the right time, but because of this technical problem, I don't know if you have heard public comment yet. So let me know.
You are absolutely able to do public comment right now. I'm still getting text messages saying that folks are just getting the new link. So you're welcome to give your
Okay.
comment. Please do 2 minutes. We'll also hold another public comment at the end of the meeting for
Okay.
folks who weren't able to do it, but go for it.
All right.
Alita.
All right, thank you. 2 minutes, understood. Appreciate it. Thanks, Chair Ann Olivia. Alita Dupree for the record, she and her. A clock would be nice. I appreciate the work that's happening, and I'm looking forward to things we're going to talk about. I'm just mentioning that as I get into this new year, I'm learning more about electricity and how to use it in an empowering way. And I look forward to you continuing on with your citizens advisory role in advocating for the basics. As I am simply an ordinary user of residential electricity. I have an account in my own name. I've never bought commercial electricity, but I am enjoying 100% solar power in my home and demand-based electricity. So how can we empower our customers to be enlightened in their use of electricity and to continue the work of electrification? According to the old advertisements of live better electrically, because my home is all electric, I don't have any open flames when I'm cooking or heating up hot water. And so the air is cleaner in my home as long as I don't create smoke when I run the broiler. It's a good thing. And transportation is important, and helping people to be more tech aware, improving our customer service. And we already do a good job with a lot of these things. But our outreach to the community, I like public power because it allows people like myself to speak and to share and exchange ideas. Nothing against investor-owned utilities. I own some shares in investor-owned utilities, but they don't have meetings like you do, where I can spend 2 minutes and share respectfully what's on my mind. I do hope that in the future we can work better on our technical problems, but I thank you for your response and that I'm able to attend the meeting with you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Alita. Your presence is always welcome. Are there any other members of the public with their hands raised? And for folks who are just joining, right now, Lori, actually, what is the answer to that question? Do we have other members of the public with their hands raised?
Yes, we do. I had to get over to that side to check on it. I have an Audrey. I'm going to allow you to talk, Audrey. Go ahead.
Thank you. Finally, I mean, I just joined after, I guess, you had given some news about Adrian. And I think that we're all suffering from difficulty in administrative kinds of things. My main message is that I wanted to call the CAC's attention to what is happening with Central Coast Energy, 3CE. And there, a proposal is being brought by the CEO to amend the CAC's bylaws to formally limit them to input on agenda items set by staff. I hope anyway, it represents really an attempt by staff to formally limit the CAC input. And I think it's important for us to be aware of the difficulties of the public's interaction with staff and with the board because of, you know, our own lack of expertise. So anyway, this proposal will come up before 3CE's policy board on February 16th at 9 a.m. It's agenda item 10. And I think that it is really important for all of us to be aware of you know, fighting, pushing back on attempts to limit our input. In fact, really, we should all be working toward increasing our ability to contribute. Thanks very much. I see my time's running out.
Thank you, Audrey. And I will take a look at that as well. I really appreciate it. So I do not have a co-host power yet, so I can't move Cynthia over from attendee to panelist. So if somebody who does have that power could do that, that would be great. She is the phone number there that we will not announce out loud. So seeing no further members of the public with their hand raised, we will go now into our next item, which is approval of a legislative position. I believe that we are hearing from Melissa. Is that correct? I don't see Melissa on here.
Paul, you're muted.
Hello, everyone. This is Paul Hernandez with the policy team. I'll be presenting on Melissa's behalf today. So a pleasure to address everyone and look forward to taking up the item. So we'll go ahead and just wait for slides, I believe, and then we can go from there.
You're doing legislative, Paul?
Yes, I am.
Can you see it on the screen?
Yes, I can. If we could scroll down, I believe that there's going to be the PowerPoint slides at the end there.
Oh, okay, I see.
Okay.
Let me
great.
see if I can get it enlarged while you're talking. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to address you today. We're going to cover 3 specific matters today, with the first being a recommended bill position on AB 814. We'll also be touching on the 2-year bills that EBC has been tracking, specifically through our bill tracker. And then lastly, what we'll do is just a quick roadmap looking at what our expectations are for the year as we go into 2022. So with that, what we'll go ahead and do is move directly into highlighting AB 814 in our recommendation. Please move to the next slide. Okay, great. So our recommendation at this time is to take a support position for AB 814. This bill is sponsored by California Community Choice Association. And just in highlighting a high level of the bill, it authorizes CCAs to file applications at the CPUC for programs to accelerate widespread transportation electrification and to receive reimbursement for approved changes from the applicable electrical corporations distribution centers. So diving in just a little bit deeper, and then we'll go from there. Under existing law, electrical corporations are required to file TE applications, with costs being recovered from all customers, including EBCE's customers, through utility distribution rates. So this bill enables CCAs to file TE applications and requires electrical corporations to reimburse CCAs, collecting the changes through utility distribution rates in the same manner as their own approved costs. In this manner, CCAs are not competitively disadvantaged, and their customers are not unfairly burdened with additional costs when CCA administrators a CPUC approved TE program. So in terms of policy alignment, it aligns well with EBCE's legislative principles to accelerate decarbonization efforts, to promote local development. In terms of public policy, it aligns with our position on non-bypassable charges and our policy position to expand educational, neighborhood, and social services, in this case through the programs that we could file and potentially administer. So our recommendation at this time is support position for the bill. And thank you for the opportunity to present AB 814, and happy to answer any questions that you have before moving to the next item.
Thank you. Does anyone, specifically as this is the action that the board is being asked to take, does anybody have specific questions from the committee on this? We'll take, actually, how do you want to do it? Do you want to take questions from the public on this particular bill before you move on to the next one, since this is the recommendation to the board?
I'm sorry, is that being addressed to me? I apologize.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay, how about I'll do the remaining presentation, and then following that, I will follow your direction in terms of the next steps to be taken.
Great, that would be great.
Okay, I appreciate that. Sorry, apologies and the missed step there. Okay, so moving to the next item. So just highlighting the bill tracker. This is the same bill tracker that we saw in our last session together. Just kind of wanted to highlight specifically the areas in yellow. These are the items that have specifically died this year. So that includes AB 427, AB 1159, and AB 1239. And if you can move to the next page as well, please.
Can you explain to folks what chaptered means?
Chaptered means that it has passed and it is before the governor to be signed. So that means that the bill has moved and is becoming law. That is what chaptered means.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. And so as we can see on the next item as well, two bills have died. SB 31 has died, as well as SB 345. Now, specifically, what we wanted to highlight also are bills that are in second house. So this includes SB 99, which is a 2-year bill. It is now converted over to SB 833. That's something I just wanted to note that we'll be tracking it as SB 833 moving forward. And SB 551, as well as SB 612 have moved to second house. So that means that these are active bills. In terms of our positioning right now, we are in active monitoring mode of these bills as they move into the next legislative session. So no other recommendations on positioning at this time as these bills advance forward. And so the last item that I'll be highlighting here are our key deadlines. Specifically, we're kind of in the fourth bullet right there, which is that we're on Friday going to see our bill introduction deadline. This is when we anticipate that there will be many bills coming out in a very large volley, so to speak. And following that, what we will see is that bills will move through their different committees as they move onto the floor. Specifically for May 27th. That's a key date that we should note will be the last day for bills to pass out of House of Origin. And also noting that the governor's budget must be passed by 6/15. Bills in opposite houses essentially have between July 1st and August 31st to move through the process. And in terms of signing, what we should expect is that September 30th is the last day for the governor to sign bills. So in terms of our roadmap as of right now, the main thing that we are monitoring is the bill introduction deadline and expecting a large volley at that time. So. And then if you could move to the next slide, please. So just summarizing where we are, we're reviewing and analyzing new bills and amendments as they come out, especially as they come out this Friday. We're monitoring bills on our watch list and determining when EBCE should take a formal position. We'll be and plan to send position letters for bills once we've formally taken those positions. In terms of the governor's budget, we're monitoring the governor's budget request very closely. It includes $6.1 billion over 5 years for zero-emission vehicles. And in addition to that, we will be engaging with CalCCA on legislative matters. So those are the next steps as highlighted. So thank you for the opportunity to present to you today, and happy to take any questions that you have. Appreciate it.
And actually, Lori, if you could put up the action item again, that would be greatly appreciated. Because that first one is the staff is asking the board to take a position of support on this item. And so I just want to have you give the 20-second review of that again, and then we will go to public comment and then to committee member questions. So if you could just give us the real quick summary of that again.
Yes. So this bill authorizes CCAs to file applications at the CPUC for programs to accelerate widespread transportation electrification and to receive reimbursement for approved charges from the applicable electrical corporation distribution customers. Great.
Okay. So if we could go first to public comment. Thank you so much for that presentation. It's an exciting thing that you're putting forth right now. If we could go first to members of the public with their hand raised, and actually the non-committee members, if they could get moved back to panelists. Sorry, move back as attendees. That would be great. And so Alita, actually leave Alita there for a second because she will make a comment, but if Audrey could get moved back as an attendee, that would be great. And we will go first to Alita. You've got 2 minutes. Go for it.
All right, thank you again, Chair Ann Olivia. Alita Dupree for the record, she and her. I'm in support of this 1814, and transport electrification is very important. And it's not just about personal automobiles, though those are an important part of it. I remember my days of having a car and wanting an electric car at the time, but couldn't because I lived in an apartment complex and couldn't put in my own charging. But this is also, I would hope in this bill, I would think so, that this will help agencies like ourselves to be able to advance transportation electrification for buses, which I ride, and trucks. A lot of trucks going in and out of the Port of Oakland. There's a lot of opportunities even for people who don't have cars. And so I think this is worthy to bring to the board. I hope that the board will accept it. And I think they will. But there is equity in this because it's no fun when only some can access the benefits. And when you're dealing with older housing stock, especially your apartment complexes, which were never built for electrification because it didn't exist at the time. And our trucking industry, which is seeing some opportunities for short haul. And of course, I can't wait to ride on an electric bus. I've done it before and I want to see it become widespread. So I thank you for bringing this forward. I believe that you as a committee, it's worth passage, and let's encourage the board to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alita. Jessica, you've got 2 minutes. If you could make that say 2, it'd be great.
Yeah, I can't, so I have to do it twice.
Okay. You're great at this. Go for it. Is Jessica unmuted?
Let me make sure she's moved.
And if you would like to make me a co-host, then I can help.
I did that, Anna.
Anna Olivia, and no, it didn't work. I am not.
Oh, it didn't work. Okay, maybe it was the other link. Let me.
Can you hear me?
Okay, Jessica, there you go.
Okay, yeah, just very quick. It sounds good. It sounds like something that East Bay Clean Power Alliance would support. I think, yeah, the emphasis, huge emphasis on electrifying public transportation and municipal transportation as well. And so, yeah, I think those are my comments, just keeping it short and sweet. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. That was great. Audrey, you are I see your hand up, so you have 2 minutes if you would like to go.
Thank you. I'll make this very brief too. It's a great thing to do. I'm just wondering if EBCE staff has sort of projected what you would need in terms of more manpower to apply for these grants and implement them. What?
Wait, why did that cut her off?
I don't think so.
Audrey, you might have accidentally hit mute because you stopped all of a sudden.
Let me see.
Great. Thank you. So,
okay. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, I'm back. Thanks.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so so that was my question. I think the program is the intention and it's great. But have you assessed what kind of manpower you would need, EBCE would need to follow through on this, both in terms of applying and implementing programs?
Thank you, Audrey.
Would you like us to respond, Chair Eldred, or should we wait till the end?
That would, let's see, I don't see any other members of the public with their hands raised, so now would be a great time to respond.
Okay.
There is another person.
Oh,
we're in the
well, just Chris just raised his hand, so we can take.
Yes, I think the answer is we're in the process of evaluating what the resource needs are for infrastructure development. You know, I think from a grants perspective, we are resourced to go after grants.
Thank you. And then Chris Peoples, it's great to have you with us tonight. You've got 2 minutes if you'd like to make your comment.
Thank you. Just let me make a brief comment. My name is Chris Peoples. I am an elected at-large director of the Alameda Contra Costa Transit District. We have been operating zero-emission buses for 20 years and did various experiments before that, starting into the 70s. We have a very extensive plan to run both hydrogen fuel cell electric and battery electric buses. We have WSP, which is a big engineering firm, gave us plans for all 4 of our yards. Our experience with PG&E has not been wonderful. When we began our experiments with battery electric buses, we gave them 2 years notice and they were a year late in providing us with the electricity. We ended up with our first battery electric buses sitting parked for a year, and that was not very useful. We are in the middle of a 2-year experiment where we are running both hydrogen fuel cell electric and battery electric buses and comparing them to diesel. We're doing interim reports every 6 months. The second one is out. I will be happy to share it with you. That has extensive information about infrastructure, what infrastructure we need, how much power we need, etc. And I can hook you up with the people at AC Transit who are doing all of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And actually, I sit on the Policy Advisory Council for MTC and am Vice Chair of the Equity Access Subcommittee. I would love to receive that information and distribute it to everyone. And thank you again for coming tonight. That was awesome. So seeing no more members of the public with their hands raised, did we receive any written comments that was submitted prior to 5 p.m. yesterday evening?
No, we did not.
Great. Then we will go now to our committee members. Cynthia?
Yes. This bill sounds like a bill, and I'm an AC. I choose not to have a vehicle. I am curious, besides the, I believe the expansion of electric vehicles, or the, what other projects are we looking at? I mean, would we be pairing with other entities in terms of decarbonizing large trucks and other large vehicles and buses outside of AC Transit that do, pollute our environment? So I'm also interested in equity issues, as Alita and Jessica mentioned. So I just want to understand better the full scope of the projects we are envisioning. If you could please answer that.
Sure, I'll go ahead and hop in from the bill perspective, and then perhaps other colleagues will hop in as well. The section of code that this particular bill is looking into is specifically seeking to implement transportation electrification projects. And transportation electrification is actually quite broad in terms of its definitions within public utility code. So to your point on buses and trucks and kind of like the larger fleet, that would technically fall under the transportation electrification definition. To your second point on matters of equity, the particular section of code that this bill focuses on also has touch points on equity policies as well, specifically AB 1550 and SB 550. So those are also components that would have touch points as well. And perhaps other colleagues would want to speak to specific projects, but in terms of the bill itself will definitely have touch points across both of those aspects.
Speak to the specific projects. So yes, certainly we're working with Transit District. We have active dialogue with AC Transit, as well as specific cities that operate transit fleets. We have been conducting electrification fleet assessments for many of our cities for much of the last year. And through those fleet assessments have been helping them ascertain what vehicles and what kind of infrastructure they may need to deploy to be able to electrify their fleets.
Thank you, because I think that's an important aspect of electrification beyond, electrification of vehicles and also large trucks. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Mary?
Thank you. I'm going to lower my hand. So I have 3 questions about this. First of all, I think EBCE should support this bill. So that's kind of a given for me. But I have 3 questions about the bill. One, and actually some implementation of it. One, does this bill allow the CPUC to have programs and incentives that go beyond charging infrastructure? I'm looking at the bill itself, and it sometimes it seems to have wiggle room that you can do things, programs that enhance electrification of transportation that is not infrastructure, and at other times there are. So that's one question. The second being, are there any existing programs and projects now? Because this is apparently an amended bill, so it's not clear to me if the CPUC already has some of this going, and maybe it was amended during the whole process. And then the third is, I don't understand where the money is going to come from exactly. I think this bill gives the utilities an opportunity to pass the cost along within a line item, the rate recovery component of it. But who sets how much is going to be available? Is that a CPUC item then that says, hey, we're going to have a $50 million pilot or program, and it's going to end up in your rates, or it's going to end up as a line item on your costs? So 3 things. Can you help me understand it a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll hop in there and I'll go right in order here. So the first is in terms of the definition of TE, it is quite broad. So if there was a way to link additional resources to an electrification project to make it more broad, more creative and things of that sort, that would be something that would be flexible within the definition and would fit within the intent of this particular legislation. So, so in other words, it's not exclusively one type of vehicle, but has a lot of flexibility in that sense in terms of how to implement projects. In terms of existing programs and projects, there are multiple projects right now underway across all 3 of the IOUs. So PG&E has multiple programs deployed, as well as SCE and SDG&E. They have been deploying programs now roughly for about, I want to say roughly 8 to 10 years or so. Again, with kind of a diverse approach to how TE is interpreted in that sense. Sometimes focused very much on EV charging, sometimes more focused on supporting buses and truck infrastructure. Vehicle to grid integration projects are also some things that have been tested. So in answering the second question, there are multiple programs right now that have been implemented by the IOUs. In terms of the third aspect, which is funding, ultimately these are focused on programs that are rate-based. And so this would be our ability to create programs that are specifically funded through EBCE rate payers. Any of our proposals would ultimately go through the CPUC regulatory process and be vetted in that way. But ultimately, it would be a way to ultimately rate-based programs.
But they're not EBCE rates. My understanding is it's coming from the distribution side. So it's the rates that show up on your PG&E bill for us on the T&D side, not EBCE side. Is that, do I have that incorrect?
So what I'll go ahead and do is forward the specific assessment of fiscal impact, which is that our assessment is that it is unlikely to be a net increase in utility distribution charges, but rather a shift in the allocation of TE funds, with some funds going to the CCAs. So in other words, we're seeking to access funding that is otherwise being accessed by the IOUs for us to access that for implementing these programs.
Okay, so the pie is already set. We're just trying to get a piece of it, is what, that's kind of how I think of it. Okay. The funding pie is set. And
it is, and it's a rate-based pie that we're all adding to that pie.
Okay, thank you.
That was really helpful. It would be great if you could send that to all of the CAC, and if it could also be attached to the minutes of the meeting so it's available to the public.
Absolutely. And I was specifically referencing the fiscal impact component, which was added earlier to our slide deck and sent widely. So, but I'll be happy to send out that again.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Joel?
Sure. Hey, Paul, I have two questions. The first question is, as of the status of today, before we have this bill passed, other than the utility companies or big IOUs, what other organizations are allowed to file applications to CPUC for those transportation electrification fundings? And my second question is, if the bill passed, are they only authorized as community choice aggregators, or they are also authorizing other organizations? And also, when it's passed, so they will let all the qualified organizations to compete for funding, or we will become the sole source?
Okay, great. So I'll just go ahead and take those in order there. So right now, the purpose of the area of code that we're looking at is to authorize IOUs to file applications. So specifically, the applications that are being filed is no one outside of the IOU. So that's kind of how that should be understood. And then the second part to that is it's also not a process through which other organizations apply to the CPUC for this. With that said, there are components of this that have potential marketing, education, and outreach, and other pieces of funding that may be attached to that. But the initial application process is specifically by, in this case, by the CCA or by the IOU specifically, and not outside of those particular parties. And then from there, once the application is filed, then it goes specifically into, I'll reference at least how the IOU's process went. The application will go into rulemaking process, and then from there, stakeholders will be able to engage with the application that is ultimately filed, and it will be spoken to then in that regulatory forum.
I see. So this bill introduces more competition for the available funding.
Yes, and it would be CCA approach of this application process and seeking to implement the application process.
I see. Yeah. Thanks for your answer.
Yeah, thank you.
That was wonderful. So at this point, staff is asking for the board to take a position of support for this item. I would be looking at this point for a motion from the Community Advisory Committee. Mary?
I motion that the Community Advisory Committee support staff's recommendation.
Is there a second?
William Mutzenberg
Second.
seconds.
Cynthia, great. William, were you saying something too?
Oh, I said second.
Oh, okay, so we're gonna go with Member Landry because I heard her voice first. That's how they usually do it, I guess. So we have a motion on the table, and seeing no further discussion, can the clerk
And
please
Olivia?
take a, yes?
Jim Lutz here.
Oh, hi, Jim, I don't see you.
I dialed in, so I can't raise my hand.
Ah, got it.
So I was waiting I have a couple of, I would like to speak in favor of the motion. But I had a couple questions. One, in describing the bill, Paul mentions that it's in line with the EBC board approved legislative program. And I've never seen that legislative program. I don't know that I'd have any disagreements with it. And the description of the project sounds very good. So it's more a question about the legislative program. So.
Sure. So what I was specifically referencing was actually outlined in the memo that was circulated and attached to this agenda as well. So how about I will touch base with Melissa specifically on that particular point and get back to you. But that, in terms of where that is right now, it's publicly accessible in that document.
If you could put a link in the chat or on where that where the legislative program.
Sure. Give me a few. Sure. Let me dig into that reference and then get that back to you. So it will take me a moment.
No rush. Another question on this one specifically, although it may be way too early, would this bill allow vehicle to grid infrastructure, or is it flexible enough that it would cover that if EBCE wants to do it? Because it seems like if you get that many electric cars running around, that's an awful lot of batteries that could be tapped into. You know, if vehicle to grid gets straightened out and done right, help a lot.
Yes, my short response to that would be yes. Kind of building off of that would be that prior applications have also focused on VGI matters. So especially within the concept of the scope of transportation electrification, that would definitely be something that could be considered within scope, so to speak.
Good. Thank you.
All right, Cynthia, is your hand still raised? Or I'm feeling a little concerned about time right now. No, it's not. All right, so seeing no further discussion, if we could have the clerk do a roll call vote, and we will say that the legislative program is on the EBCE website under legislative priorities. Thank you, Member Sutter, for that.
Mutzenberg,
William, you were being asked to vote on the.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Lutz,
Is that me? Yes.
that's you. How do you pronounce your
Jim
last
Lutz.
name? Lutz, okay. Sutter,
Yes.
Member Souza,
Yes.
Member Dugan,
I don't think I vote, right? Joel's here, so I'm an alternate. I didn't think I voted.
Oh, okay. Member Lou?
I think this bill will, the pass of this bill will allow more ideas for the transportation electrification initiative, and it will bring very good things, more accommodations. So I think it's a great idea. I like what introduced. I vote yes.
Thank you.
And just as a point of order, that was awesome, but we do during voting, we just do the actual voting and then discussion is reserved for discussion times. But thank you for your enthusiastic support.
Okay, thanks.
Member Frank?
Yes.
Member Landry?
Yes.
Member Eldridge?
I'm going to abstain.
Abstain.
I'm in support, but I'm going to abstain on the vote.
Passes 9-1. Thank you. 9-1 abstention. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Just because I'm on the Transportation Public Advisory Board, I'm not sure if that would propose any form of conflict of interest. So I'm just gonna recuse myself from that one. So with that, we will move to, I don't think it does, but just in case, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is power content guidelines and zero emission 2030. This is an informational item. I will say that the item that I had requested be on the agenda was one addressing the multiple member of the public's issues around our current power mix and its relative carbon contributions to other CCAs and investor-owned utilities. So I'm just hoping that a little touch of that can be included in this presentation as well, so that we can address the issue and go for it.
Yeah. Nick, do you want to give an intro on this? Or should I just jump in? Nick or Howard? I'm okay just rolling.
I'll give an intro. So, you know, the purpose of this presentation is to provide both an overview of where we have been, which is really probably most relevant to the public comments that have been raised about our power content, and then focus on what our power content could be, will be over the next 8 years. I think, Jim, I can just speak to, when I speak to this table and you go forward with the rest of it, because I think this is the table that speaks to the public comment. So in 2019 and 2020, we did see a meaningful change in our power content label and the emissions factor. A big component of this, which we see here, has to do with the transition from the climate registry to the California Energy Commission's PSDR emissions factor. That transition resulted in a number of resources that we have procured and counted as carbon-free, no longer being given carbon-free credit. So the primary example there is we had previously counted PCC2 renewables as carbon-free for the purposes of our power content label using the climate registry. Under the PSDR methodology, emissions or zero emission resources are only counted if they are zero emissions in California as opposed to zero emissions globally. And so as such, PCC2 resources were no longer counted as emissions free. They are still counted as renewable, but for California emissions purposes, they were counted as having system power emissions factors. Jim, is that, did I cover it? Feel free to jump in if I missed anything.
Yeah, I think the portrayal of the difference between the accounting methodology of the TCR and the PSDR is correct. We do need to look at one component, was that when we transitioned from 19 to 20, we also changed our plan design a bit as the board elected not to take on the nuclear, and that did lower our carbon-free content going from 19 to 20. So, you know, a combination of having less carbon-free power in the right choice mix combined with the changing in emission factor calculation, both led to, those two kind of drove that increase that we see. And if you scroll down a little bit, there's a table of the emissions side by side for both the TCR and the PSDR. Keep going. I think it's 2 tables down from here. One more table. One more table. I know it's a lot of writing, telling me. So here is kind of a simulated what the emissions factor would have been. And so, you know, we use the TCR for 18 and 19, and when the regulations changed for the PSDR, and in 20 and onward, that's our accounting methodology. But this is a better apples to apples comparison. And so we do see emissions increase both in the TCR and PSDR methodologies as we chose to change the design of Bright Choice in response to not taking the nuclear allocation from PG&E.
So I'm going to ask one favor and just going to jump in, and I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but there are a variety of technical backgrounds on this body. Several folks are technical experts, and other folks are experts in other fields that are not necessarily emissions reporting, as well as a variety of expertise level among the members of the public. If there's any way that some of these can be just the most plain spoken as possible, avoiding acronyms if it's at all possible, or at least explaining what they are so that there's a greater understanding. This is an issue that's been brought to us repeatedly. And so I'm just hoping to address it and then go into the presentation as you had planned, but a little bit of a simplification of the language I believe would be beneficial for at least 50% of the members and public today.
Yeah, thanks, Anna Olivia. I mean, I could speak to this stuff. I do know it really well. I think that the best resource is going to be the text of the memo itself, which I believe defines these things pretty well, but I'm happy to speak to the particulars of it. And if I give too much, apologize, but I can, you know, I know this stuff pretty well. And so, you know, we'll go back to the beginning of what is an emission factor. And so as EBCE, as an energy provider, purchase power, it comes from multiple sources, renewable and carbon-free sources, typically for our portfolio, renewable, you know, wind and solar, geothermal, large hydro, also carbon-free, but not renewable. And so every megawatt hour we purchase that comes from a renewable or carbon-free source doesn't have a relative emission amount. And so the amount of power that this is where it gets pretty complicated, for our power content label, which is our disclosure of what we bought in a given year, the amount of power on there that is deemed not purchased. And so what this means is, you know, we buy 50 megawatt hours of renewable and we have 100 megawatt hours of sales. That unpurchased 50 megawatt hours in the power content label and in the climate registry eyes, that comes out as unspecified. So we are not actually purchasing unspecified power. You have to picture that emissions is given to us for that component of our portfolio that is unpurchased energy. And so whatever that total emissions is, divided by the total amount of sales gives you an emissions factor, which is a derived metric for the amount of emissions that your power has in total for all of your sales. So that's kind of just brief on the emissions part.
That was super helpful. Thank you.
No problem. And so in acronym land, and again, apologies, we quickly revert back to the speak that we do at the office. We're looking at two ways to calculate the emission factor. One is TCR, which is the Climate Registry. And so this is a nationally recognized derived calculation methodology that has certain steps that an enrolled entity would use to be able to calculate their emissions. And we use this in 2018 and 19. A lot of our CCA partners did as well. PG&E and the IOUs also use the TCR. So it's a well-renowned and respected way to kind of calculate the emission factor. The PSDR is the Power Source Disclosure Report, and this is linked to the power content label. And so this is a process that all California load serving entities, people that deliver power to customers, go through each year, where they put together all the power they bought in a calendar year, and it goes through a bunch of review, and eventually it gets distilled down to an individual power content label. And so the regulations from the Power Disclosure Report changed through AB 1110, and that affected all load serving entities in California starting in the year 2020. And included in those regulations was explicit steps for calculating emissions that were different than that of the Climate Registry. And also included in that regulation was language to not allow load serving entities, EBC in particular, to not market emissions on any other calculation methodology. So they basically said, here's how you're going to calculate emissions using the PSDR method, and you can't show it anywhere else. And so we were, by regulation, required to report our emissions only through the Power Source Disclosure Report, abbreviated as PSDR, starting in 2020 and moving forward. How's that? Is there any more alphabet soup I left behind, or did I cover most of them?
No, that was fantastic, and frankly, the clearest explanation that I've heard yet. So that was really helpful.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. It's so easy to just kind of know that everyone knows what I'm talking about, and I know that's not often the case.
So you said the two big effects, this is Jim Lutz, you said the two big effects were the California legislation means you don't get to count greenhouse gas reductions outside of power purchased from outside of California, and then also because East Bay Community Energy stopped buying power from Diablo. So to make up for that, we had to buy some gas power.
Yeah, not that close on a lot of that, but I think in designing it, the first comment was that yes, power purchased from outside of California when injected into California still counts. For renewable energy that's within the Western area, but not injected into California, and this is typically how those PCC2 RECs are designed. The renewable energy is sunk outside California, but still consumed as renewable energy just WEC-wide, which is the Western area. So unless the renewable energy comes into the state, then we need to then have an emissions factor relative for that renewable energy. And that might not be the best way to explain it, but basically if the energy comes into state and we import it, then we can still count that. So that's part one. Part two is the change in the plan. So EBC has never purchased from Diablo, but we were offered as part of the PCIA, the power charge indifference that our customers pay, we were offered the ability to receive the nuclear energy as a pro rata share from PG&E. And we declined that. We chose not to take it. And so we have not purchased natural gas in its place. But as I mentioned earlier, there is a percentage of our power content that doesn't have a matching purchase associated with it. And so, like I said, back to the 50-100 example. So our portfolio is 100 megawatt hours of sales, 50 megawatt hours of it is renewable. That other 50 is just unpurchased. And so we're not buying natural gas, but in the eyes of the power content label, that shows up as grid unspecified emissions. So EBC does not purchase nuclear, we don't purchase natural gas, but the unpurchased component of our portfolio has an emissions applied to it.
Okay, so Thank you. And I know that this presentation is actually intended to be, this is our plan going forward to address our carbon emissions. And so I would like to let you get into the presentation you had planned on doing. So thank you for addressing that. It's important. And so I will, if there's additional questions, they can be taken at the end of this, but we are looking forward to hearing the plan moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. Yeah, and no problem. You know, I have no problem talking about this stuff too, because I do think it's very confusing, and it took me a while to understand it as well. But I think I have a good grasp on it now, and can kind of help us to show the board that in the public of what we're trying to do here. And I think that's valuable. So I think it was a really good question to ask for that background. Let's see where to begin. Can you scroll up to the top table, which I think is page 2? Yeah, we'll start from there down. You can just put on the table. I gather the presentation is not here, and that's okay. I'm fine speaking from the memo as well, so it's not an issue. So just back in time a little bit, we ran our integrated resource planning back in December of 2020, and we presented to the board different GHG scenarios based on a kind of 10-year planning horizon. And the board feedback we received at the December 2020 meeting was to work towards a zero emission electricity in 2030. And so that was in December 2000 board meeting. That's the direction we got. And since then we've worked to put the steps needed to get there. And so I know this was brought up earlier on, but this item is informational only. We're not asking for a vote necessarily. We're just presenting this as to kind of be how we're looking at how to solve this problem now and kind of annual steps. And so what we see in this table is just that. And so the darkest gray are the actual portfolio performance. And let me caveat that with one. So what we're looking at here in this table is the aggregate of all of our plans. And we'll talk about Bright Choice as well. But so this is the total between all 3 of our plans for the historical years, and then moving forward, just Renewable 100 and Bright Choice. And so you take all the renewable energy we bought and you divide it by the full amount of sales that we have, and that's how you get these percentages. And so what this is kind of the aggregate of all our plans and a target as such path to reach that zero emission, zero electricity power in 2030. And so these are annual steps that are kind of provided as guidance to get us there. And there's some kind of steps that we're talking about on how we derive this. And I think I'm going to have us scroll down to the Bright Choice table if you can, and I could speak a little more about kind of what we're trying to do. So it should be one more table down, I think. Let me see if that's right. Yeah, it is. Okay.
Just to clarify, there is supposed to be an actual presentation, like a PowerPoint presentation that goes over this as opposed to scrolling through the report.
Yes, there is a presentation that will be given to the board.
And we don't have it available for the CAC?
Cannot speak to that. And again, I'm fine going through the memo. I'm not sure where the presentation is.
I'm seeing that for this item.
Is the presentation not at the end of the memo? That's usually how these
there's a
things.
presentation that's with the board, but I think for this item, just the memo was pulled, unfortunately. So not sure if we're allowed to reference the PowerPoint because
I mean, most of the material in the presentation is pulled directly
in the
from
memo.
So it's just a matter of pacing more than it's any kind of difference in the information portrayed.
And it's supposed to match exactly the board item. So I believe that it would be just fine to pull it from the board meeting, as it is intended to be. We are commenting on the same material for the same item in order to bring something to the board if we choose to do so. So I don't think there's any issues with calling on that material. If you want to go through it now,
I think
at this point, that's just fine.
This is an information item. So I don't have a problem doing that. You know, it may be from a technical perspective, a little bit challenging for our clerk to load up that site. So I think, again, from a content perspective, the content in this memo is the same content in the slides.
Cool. In the future, it would be great if we could have at least similar presentations, but go for it. I'll continue with what we have here.
Yeah, so again, the goal was to get to 2030 zero emission electricity portfolio with gradual steps for the kind of the plan-wide renewable content. And a couple of the metrics or goals that we chose to follow in building this were obviously the biggest would be zero emission electricity by 2030 per the board December 2020 adoption. An annual reduction in emissions year over. And so we want to see that PSDR, the power source disclosure report emission factor, decrease over time. And that gets us to the 2030 timeframe. But then also important to keep the renewable content of Bright Choice above the state RPS renewable, which is in the far right column, which, you know, we've been above that through our historical time, but the goal is to stay above that. And how we built this is to, by the end of the planning horizon in year 2030, to be 15% above the state's RPS for the Bright Choice plan. And so again, the goals were, you know, year over reduction in emissions, being above RPS, and ending 2030 at zero emission electricity. And that's, we've kind of built backwards from there. And that's what this table shows. Okay, can we scroll down to the next table, please? So this is taking the same data from the previous, but now we're including the historical data for PG&E as well. And so, you know, the Bright Choice plan in the past has been a parity plan for PG&E to exceed them by a certain amount. And so this is just to measure the historical performance of the Bright Choice plan versus PG&E's base plan, both from a renewable perspective, which is how the current procurement guidelines ask, is to exceed that based on some kind of some backwards looking forecast of PG&E's account. And so here we've broken down the PG&E base plan content by renewable, and then another one that is their renewable and their large hydro combined. And this is the best kind of parity metric that we can use for PG&E's portfolio. They are more carbon free, but as you can see by the second column from the right, is that the majority of that is coming from their nuclear power. And so we fared pretty well historically in tracking PG&E and exceeding them for the Bright Choice plan. And that's what this table shows. And that is about it. The last table was the emissions, which we've talked about at length. You can go ahead and scroll down there, and then I'm just going to summarize, and I think we'll be good to go. So again, the big takeaway here is that the board adopted a zero emission electricity target, and that we're trying to, as an information item, show the path to get there as we see it, kind of based on the goals I discussed, which is, you know, annual reduction in emissions for Bright Choice, annual increases renewable content, and then to having Bright Choice exceed the RPS through that planning horizon. And I will stop there and open up for any questions.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation, and also for rolling so well with the multiple interruptions. We will go first to members of the public. I would ask our clerk if there was any written comment received prior to 5 p.m. yesterday.
I had no written comments. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right.
Sorry, sorry to interrupt, but there are written comments that were provided.
Well,
Lori.
Okay, I didn't receive any, I believe.
Okay, there's something in the public comment sort of Google Doc that where it is uploaded. So
Oh, I checked that today at 4:30 and I didn't have anything.
it was after 4:30.
Oh, okay, okay. Did you want to submit those, Howard?
They're on that same link that you checked at 4:30. So if you want to look on there again, otherwise I can read it as well, but they're certainly there for.
Let's see if I have Google here.
I think some of those comments were actually uploaded at like 6:30 even, so they are relatively real time, so to speak. There are 2 comments on item number 5. Or sorry, there's 2 speakers signed up for item number 5.
Lori, while we're pulling it up, why don't we go to public comment?
Yeah.
I believe we have two members of the public who have their hands raised to make public comment. So why don't we recognize them?
All right, Alita, you're first, and then Vaughn, you are next. Alita, you have 2 minutes, and while you're looking that up, Lori, I can run a timer. You won't be able to see it, Alita, but I can give you notice if you like. All right, so Alita, if you, let's see, you should be unmuted now, I think. All right.
Thank you again, Chair and Olivia. Alita Dupree for the record, she and her. Very good presentation, and thanks for breaking it down into some clearer, more plain language. I grew up with acronyms. The military uses lots of acronyms. So it looks like we're certainly going above and beyond the basic definitions of carbon-free and renewable. And I have always supported removing the nuclear allocation from our portfolio. And I think it is important that we work to restore our carbon-free level as quickly as possible, given that we no longer have the nuclear. And I think the new carbon-free that we get is going to be a better level of carbon-free. I think we should certainly look at the possibility of storage. And I'm not real familiar with how we can use renewables that are generated at one point of the day and then stored and then transferred in another part of the day. But when I see as much power curtailment that is going on at certain times of the year, which because of overgeneration and congestion, which leads to the infamous duck curve with the afternoon severe ramp up peak, that storage, I think, can help us to get there by capturing renewable, generally solar made kilowatt hours that would otherwise be curtailed and go to waste. So I want this to be an aspirational document that we can try to exceed each year, and really to ultimately build ourselves up to where the renewables and the carbon free will both get to 100%. And I think that we can do it sooner rather than later if we can solve the infrastructure challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. And great on timing, actually. Vaughn, you are up. Let me reset my timer, and you should be unmuted.
I'm assuming you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I can.
My question is somewhat along the lines of what Alita went up to. Do you, the staff, I'm sure you're working towards this, and recognize that there's a difference between carbon-free and completely renewable and all that kind of stuff. Do you have some guesstimate on when or if EBCE will ever get to the point where you have enough combination storage and generation to actually be 100% renewable? I mean, not buried in the different acronyms and stuff like that, but I mean, you have to have a lot more storage or a lot more generation than you have now. And you need a lot more storage to make up for it based upon what the Norway and Denmark and Europe and stuff has done on that stuff. They needed like 150 or 200% renewable energy with almost 100% storage to be able to get to 100% renewable. And you really can't do it without enough storage. And the storage isn't where we need it to be technically right now or affordable. So do you have any guess on when EBCE would get to that point at all?
I can speak to this. So our current policy, as noted in the presentation, sets a target for us to get to 100% clean energy by 2030. And that includes somewhere between 70 and 75% renewables. 70 to 80%, I guess, is probably a bigger range. I think the time frame to incrementally get to 100% renewables, I would hesitate to put a specific timeline on that, but certainly once we are at 100%, we will be required to continue to procure 100% renewables. It's not 100% in 2030 and somehow decline from there. So I presume that we will incrementally add more and more renewables to our 100% clean energy mix as we progress, and certainly energy storage will be a big part of that.
Thank you. So I am hearing, I see that there is another member of the public. Jessica Tovar, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks. I'll be quick. This is Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. And well, we had similar comments. Obviously, the point of the local development business plan was to make more investments in local production and storage of energy through Alameda County, Tracy. So that we would rely less on a lot of the remote purchase of energy. And certainly we've already gone through being pretty clear in that we wouldn't want to see, nuclear added in East Bay community energy. So I think, our point is we should be doing those investments and adding more local generation so that we did rely less on that remote stuff. And then one of the questions that has come up was, is East Bay Community Energy following or part of that high distributed energy resources proceedings, I'm assuming through the CPUC, and if there's any plans to do so. And I think that's it for now.
Thank you. Would someone like to answer that?
I'm not specifically familiar with that proceeding. I presume, though, that we do have staff who are monitoring that, because our staff monitors all relevant proceedings.
I just want to add one thing too, is that, this report glosses over a lot of kind of the intricacies of, how power works and how we kind of call zero emission electricity. But this year we go through our integrated resource planning procedure, and a lot of that will address kind of how storage works within our portfolio, more than this presentation does, which really speaks at a high level. But there'll be times during the IRP process this year to kind of speak on how those pieces are integrated.
Thank you so much. I see no more members of the public with their hands raised. Can we visit the comments? Are they something that can be summarized or read in the allotted time?
I have one that's very lengthy, but I can read it to you.
In general, written comment is just submitted as part of the record, but we haven't gotten minutes in so long that doesn't feel good to me. We can give the speaker the same 2 minutes as everybody else. So if you would like to read it, we can
Okay.
do 2 minutes of that. That would work. I can
It
see-
shouldn't be 2 minutes. Let me try this. Okay, so good evening. My name is Richard Rollins and I live in Berkeley. I'd like to start by thanking Jim for the informative report. The information presented is much easier to digest than the integrated resource plan itself. While I understand that the information presented responds to the board's request, I am deeply disappointed with the report and its utility to members. My disappointment is associated with several aspects of the report. First is the fact that only one pathway was considered. What we have with this report is one pathway and one target and no information about options. It would be very helpful and informative to see 2 or 3 target dates and achieve 100% clean energy. Such a report would help with the community. And 2, I'm disappointed with the aspects of the report in the way that EBCE appears to ignore the set aside goals for those jurisdictions that in 2018, I'm missing some wording here. 2018, select bright choice. Yeah, I can't see it. It goes off the page. The third disappointing feature is the report that is the costs are not mentioned. The only mention of physical impact is that the proposed pathway will likely cost more. Very sincerely, Tom Kelly, Berkeley.
So did that comment begin with Richard Rollins and with?
Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's all in the same, I believe.
No, I think you might have just moved and read into the sort of the last closing comments of actually a separate comment that Tom
Is
Kelly
there? Okay.
as part of public comment.
Okay. I think you will make sure to include those and I'll summarize them for the meeting on Wednesday if I could get a copy of them and I can try and sort that out. Mary, we'll turn now to comments and questions from members of the CAC. Just to point out, it is 8 o'clock, but there's been a grip of technical difficulties. So thank you for sticking with us. Mary?
So I'd like to cede or have Jim go first. He had his hand raised before I even did mine, but I know he can't actually do his hand raise. So if you could let Jim go.
Sorry. Yeah, Jim,
No,
go
that's
for it.
fine. He was going like this and I'm sure you couldn't see it. So I just didn't have Jim go and then I'll ask my question.
Perfect. Jim, go for it. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Mary. My question was, back to Doug, Jim, sorry. Was the carbon-free, is that mostly large hydro? And if so, isn't that, with all the weather concerns and drought concerns and announcements of mega droughts, isn't that somewhat risky? And do projecting a drought 10 years into the future is not something I'd want to do, but I do want to know that East Bay Community Energy is at least considering contingency plans if large hydro dries up, heaven forbid.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Jim, and a valid concern. And, as we built this, we did it as kind of, a path more than hard targets. So yes, in an ideal world, they'd be ample amounts of generation from carbon-free large hydro, but we all know that's not the reality. And so we built this as a framework. And honestly, the non-renewable carbon-free options out there are not great. But my thought was that if there's always the potential to have more renewable that's on there, which is also carbon-free. But does that get us to those heavy numbers in the backyards? I don't know that answer.
Jim, I think the only other point I would make is when we, if you think about it, the integrated resource plan and its relation to this, these are not all long-term contracts. So it's when we think about locking in the 20% or so, or 25% that may come from large hydro as an example. The assumption is that those will be shorter term contracts that will be entering into towards the back half of the decade. That gives us the ability to assess availability, and if the availability is not there, then we can pursue other renewables. So we're averaging ourselves in over time to give ourselves the ability to sort of assess conditions as they occur.
Can I just add one other point on that, which is in our initial years, right around launch, we had target large hydro or zero emissions energy that was non-renewables, that was in the 45-47% range, so very significant number. And it was through 2018, 2019, 2020, where of course we've been in drought conditions, and we've acknowledged that that is very challenging to ensure that you can procure that level of large hydro, and so adjusted our procurement targets to account for that, where we're really looking at the allocation from PG&E. And so when you look at that type of a percentage, which is more in the 15 to 20% range, that's what we're continuing to project forward over the course of the next 10 years, getting to 2030 is still in that 20 to 25% range, which is, it's not to say that there's not risk there. There's quite a bit of risk, as we're seeing with poor drought conditions, but it is, from our perspective, a reasonable target to have.
Thank you. That was helpful. For time's sake, I'm gonna move now to Mary.
Thank you. And this could be quick, because I think my question is really more expansive than this, but I was trying to get a sense of this plan that's that you're putting forward, and how much of the procurement that has occurred within EBCE and you plan to occur long-term procurement in the next in the next several years will this plan support? I guess I'm trying to differentiate how solid those numbers might be, because you have long-term procurement put in place with some of the contracts that I know Howard has brought to us in the past around renewable type of things.
So under the integrated resource plan, by law, 60% of our renewables need to be under long-term contract, and the RPS is 60%. So 60% of 60 would be 36% under long-term contracts. I think our current framework is to significantly exceed that in terms of the actual quantity of long-term contracts, but that's the statutory requirement. I believe that the IRP actually has a more like 70% renewables or 75% renewables under the current CPUC standard.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane?
Thank you. I'll try to be quick too. I think some aspects of my question have been touched on. I think particularly Jim touched on something I was also wondering about. So I guess to kind of narrow it down, also thinking about procurement, of all this, this kind of roadmap that you've put forth, how on the renewable side, how much is coming from projects that are already in existence versus projects that are actively, ground is broken, being developed, versus like things we hope or anticipate are going to be developed, farther down the line?
I can go ahead and answer that. I mean, right now we have 3 projects online. We have another 6 that are executed, and those roll on starting here this year and into 2025. And in addition to that, we're working to contract other long-term deals as well. And so, we don't have the large breadth of our contracted generation online. And so I don't think it's accurate to say, how much, I can't say the amount that we have tracking that amount, but we do have additional procurement we have to do, but we're well on our way to satisfying the requirements we need from the state.
I think one way to think about it in absolute megawatts is we have 1,000 megawatts of renewable generation under contract. I couldn't tell you how many megawatts we're expecting to procure in this upcoming solicitation. That 1,000 megawatts is probably gives you a good sense of what we have procured today, that we are have delivered. So we have roughly 150 megawatts of operating generation. And over the next 3 years,
we have about 300 megawatts of operating generation.
oh yeah, right. You're right. We had one that just came online, right? So that's we have 300 megawatts, and so over the next 3 years, the rest of that generation is going to be coming online.
Jane, does that do it for you? Yes. All right, great. So seeing no other comments, I'm just going to touch on mine real quick. And this is going back to the first conversation that was had. It's possible that I misheard, but what I heard was that we had to replace the projection to have nuclear in our mix. And it is my understanding that the nuclear allocation was never supposed to show up on our power content label, and that it was never part of our projected mix. So if I misunderstand that, I would like to receive some information on that topic. I felt like that topic was really thoroughly discussed with lots and lots of really clarifying statements. And so what I just heard during that presentation seems to go contrary to it. And I'd like to touch just for a minute on one of the written comments that we received. The first part that came from Richard Rollins was, if I understood this correctly, was stating that only one avenue was being looked at. And I'm wondering if staff can address that concern. Have other avenues been looked at and this is the one that's selected? I know that a certain percentage of our, I'm having trouble with words today, of our planning goes towards energy efficiency and conservation, energy capture, those kinds of things to reduce load. That is absolutely wonderful and a renewable source. So I'm just wondering if you can address that concern that was brought up by the member of the public.
Can I, Nick, did you want to speak this or?
Howard.
I was just going to know, because I do have the question in front of me, and Olivia, so I may be able to make sure to kind of be on point with what his question was sort of seeking. And what I want to clarify is that this report is looking at a already board adopted resolution, which is get to 100% clean energy by 2030. And I think we're very familiar with that target of ours, proud of that target, and something that our board members and we had sort of active discussions on, I think last year or even early, actually a little over a year ago. That's not what we're trying to discuss on this item. It is really with that as the baseline. What is the what is the step-by-step approach to get there? And while it is certainly fair to consider there could be multiple scenarios as to how you do that, I think we really look at that process as part of the integrated resource planning process. There's much more sort of rigorous analysis done in that process, which is what informed the 2030 carbon, clean energy goal that we, is the basis of this item. We're not trying to discuss that particular already board approved sort of target. What we're trying to show is what is the sort of, where are we at now and how do we get to that 2030 in a rather succinct fashion to say, let's set a baseline here and we will definitely continue to refine this through our biannual sort of IRP process that will continue to actually do much more rigorous analysis behind how do you fold in things like energy efficiency, local programs, transportation electrification, things like that. And so I think I guess my clarification here is just that the board resolution that was already adopted, I think lays out that process alone had multiple scenarios that were laid out. And the board voted to choose one of those scenarios. And we're just trying to put a little bit more detail in that at this stage.
Thank you for the clarification. That will be very helpful to the member of the public too.
And then Olivia, on your first point on nuclear, I'm not sure where we may have conflicted with prior nuclear discussions. I didn't think we did. It certainly wasn't our intent. I think everything that was discussed there, we certainly stand behind and we're managing, in accordance with that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for that reassurance. It's much appreciated. All right, it is 8:13 p.m. You all are rock stars. And thank you for the very thorough and clear explanation of a very complicated topic. That was fantastic. I probably want to interview you, frankly. That was really good. So I am going to move us now into agenda item 6, which is Community Advisory Committee member and staff announcements, including requests to place items on future CAC agendas. Are there any EBCE related announcements? Cynthia?
Yes. I know this topic is on the, I believe, the Finance Committee meeting this coming week. Can we place the item of stipends on our next agenda?
Cynthia, just so you know, the agenda item is on the Finance Committee meeting. The last I checked, the agenda was not yet posted on the EBCE website, but that deadline wouldn't be until tomorrow anyways. The item that is being heard is titled something along the lines of a discussion and feedback regarding an increase in the stipends for board and I hope CAC members. And at the beginning of the meeting, although it might not have been called to order yet, I just did address some of those things. So because we have not had minutes and we have not been able to approve them, we have not been able to confirm attendees for the meetings. We will have that addressed by next meeting because we know that it is that the stipends are an important part of people being able to participate in these meetings. And so your concerns, I'm so very grateful that you raised them and that we are actively working to address them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I don't know if there was an update on our colleague who is not here tonight, Adrian. But I know that I wish him well, and if and if we could, if permissible, send our warm regards to him and wishing him well.
So we did say at the beginning, you might have actually still been over as an attendee. Apologies for that, Cynthia. That the update that I've heard is that he may be on leave for a couple more months, and that we are working on finding a way to send him a card or something like that. And deep respect and best wishes from all of us to Adrian. So we'll be contacting folks to let them know how to participate in that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, happily. Thanks, Cynthia. All right, seeing no other announcements, we will adjourn this meeting to Monday, March 14th at 6 p.m. If the clerk could please send me the copy of the board agenda so that we can add the annotations, we can try and get that up tonight. Thank you so much all, and we will see you next month.
Thank you, Anne.
Thanks all.